happiness or my fulfillment is not connected to whether I hit that goal or not anymore, right? So now I'll set the revenue goal, and it's an exciting thing, and we can dream and we can build some amazing things around that goal. But I'm not going home disappointed. You know, occasionally I do, but in picture, I'm still happy whether I'm had a good revenue month or a bad revenue month.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. I'm your host, Phil Moeller, and on this podcast, we will be interviewing guests that have made their mark in real estate, in business, and in other areas of life. Listening to podcasts myself has helped me in so many different ways and continues to do so. If you're a real estate investor or an entrepreneur, or aspiring to be either, or just someone that wants to learn, you've come to the right place. An easy way to have an impact is to share this episode with friends or family, provide a review, or just spread the word. We greatly appreciate it, and now let's get to the show. Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's episode of the Moeller Real Estate and Business Podcast. Very excited for this week's guest, Mr. Matt Anderson, hailing from Nashville, Tennessee. Matt, how you doing, man?
Great, man. How are you?
I'm doing good. Good to see you again. For our listeners, Matt is attorney by trade, has Anderson Law or Anderson Legal, background in just the legal field, and has a business there, but also a real estate investor, family man, helps coach and mentor a lot of people as well. But just a great dude. We've met a couple of times, Matt, and really have always enjoyed our conversation. So excited to bring your wisdom to our listeners. So why don't we start right there and tell us how did you get to where you are today?
Yeah, man. So all over the place as far as my background goes. I grew up in Columbia, Tennessee, relatively small town. I didn't really know anybody with money or know anybody else that was a lawyer or professional. And I kind of found my way into college, didn't know what to do. And I really just went to law school basically because I figured that it was a profession I could figure something out from. I had no plan, basically. Got into law school, and during law school, I caught the real estate bug, just became obsessed with it. Started reading real estate books, starting listening to real estate podcasts. And my now wife and I, we did like a house hack, live and flip. And, we ended up doing like 9 of those together. And it just slowly grew into a thing where I was practicing law. And then while I was practicing law, I was trying to build a real estate portfolio and a business. And that just developed over the years where eventually the real estate became more of my focus than the law practice. And along the way, I did all kinds of entrepreneurial adventures that had mixed outcomes, like starting a property management company, starting a title company, and different things like that. And now sitting here today, we got about 275 doors in Tennessee of multifamily and small multifamily, and we've got some office buildings, and real estate's our main focus. But then I'm trying to figure out how to do this law firm thing without it, with it being mostly passive, or as passive as I can make it.
So I want to kind of, I think you have a great perspective probably, and maybe you're still working through it, on building a business that probably generates a good income and cash flow, but trying to do that passively. And then I want to compare, how do you compare that to real estate, and maybe how passive can each of them be? Because most real estate investors think the path to being passive is real estate only. And I think real estate, of course, is a phenomenal vehicle to provide the option to be passive. But I don't want people to think it's the only way. So how would you compare the two as far as the ability to be passive in your legal business versus real estate?
Yeah, and so like on the front end, I'll say I've been much more successful in figuring out how to scale and do real estate in a more passive way than I have in business so far. And I think most of that is probably skill set and mindset, right? Because when I got into real estate, the whole idea for me getting into real estate was to use it to create time freedom, right? Whereas getting into business or becoming a lawyer, I didn't have that philosophy or mentality to start with.
Yep.
So, and then skill set wise, the other thing is I'm really good at finding deals and doing creative deal structures and leveraging people and seller financing and things like that to create a portfolio and a structure that's more passive for me. Whereas in business, I started as a lawyer working for somebody else, W-2. And that was something that was less obvious to me, from the law side and from the business side. So, on the title company, on the property management company, on the law firm, I've had a history of owning a job. And
Yep.
only recently have I been trying to really figure out how to navigate owning a business like that and making it more passive. The dream would be fully passive, obviously, but yeah, so it's a work in progress.
And I think the key thing is not like, again, to reiterate, I think real estate is a great vehicle that can set up to be passive. But I think because there's such a market or a mindset generally around real estate that it is a passive thing, people
Right.
are trying to set it up to be passive. When people are starting a law firm, they're not thinking right away when they're just starting, how am I going to be passive in this business? That's not their mindset at all. So I think the point is, whatever the business is, law firm, property management, title company, service company, whatever you name it, I think the earlier you have the mindset, not of being passive, but of whatever you want that business to be and structured long term. So if long term I want it to be passive, set it up right away to be passive. Long term, if I want it to be active because I want to have this impact or grow it or make a bazillion dollars, whatever it is, like know what you want when you start and structure the business around it. So again, I think real estate does have benefits, but your mindset when you start is going to determine probably what it looks like in year 5, year 10.
Absolutely. And I think that's maybe some of why I was able to do that faster in real estate is because of the mindset and the roadmap. You know, like I didn't really have a clear roadmap to how to build these other businesses I've done or what the outcome could look like. Whereas with real estate, thanks to bigger pockets and podcasts like this, I got to learn from people who were building these portfolios and able to do it in a semi-passive way, right? So like right now with my business, I'm trying to decide when do I find the person that replaces me or most of what I'm doing.
Yep.
Um, and that's a situation that I kind of I wasn't even really thinking about for a long time on this business or the other businesses I've owned. Whereas with real estate, that was always the plan, right? There was always, okay, if we buy this apartment complex, we're going to have an on-site manager and we're going to have a professional property manager and we're going to outsource the financing, right? And pay for so all of this stuff was going to be delegated and outsourced. And we were going to, maybe the cash flow relative to the income was lower, but my passive, I was way more passive
Yeah.
from the beginning.
The other thing I think, because you're in this situation where you're making decisions, is not so going in a little bit different direction than the passive is, as you have money to invest, so as you have a liquidity and you're like, hey, I have this capital to invest, you could make decisions to invest that in real estate or to invest that in growing your law firm, possibly
Right.
even replacing yourself more in your law firm by hiring someone to replace your time. So how do you think about the dollars you're placing in those different businesses?
Yeah, that's exactly right. And a lot of it, I've just taken all my money and reinvested it into real estate. So you're exactly right about that. But mostly it was just for lack of awareness that, hey, wait a minute, I can do the same thing in my business, right? And so for me personally, there's people who do it the opposite, right? I know a lot of people, we both do, who've invested a lot of time and energy and money and skills into figuring out how to build a business that's not dependent on them.
Yep.
I didn't do that early on. I put all of my time and energy and money into investing in real estate, and I used my main business in my main skill set as a way to create like my vertical income, right?
Yeah.
So
Um,
now I'm trying to figure out if I can do both at the same time now. We'll
right.
see how it goes.
Yeah, and I think like when people think investment dollars too, I think it's okay. Do I need to, and like if you're passionate about a business and you can grow that business and you can invest in the business, assets for the business, people for the business that are going to compound it, like you should really, really think about that before real estate. If you're not and like you want to sustain the business, that's when okay, and maybe it makes sense to be investing in real estate instead of your business. So I think just how someone thinks about their investment dollars goes back to their mindset, and really it goes back to what do they want? What do they want out of their business? What are their goals out of real estate? What are they trying to get out of it? And then that will help you place the dollars. And I guess the big thing is whatever you want, like investing in yourself and what you're going to do, I think makes a lot of sense too. So, um, You mentioned earlier a little bit, and I want to talk, just spend some time on it because I think you have an interesting perspective on, you see a lot of real estate deals, deal structures, purchase agreements, operating agreements, stuff like that. We're not going to test all your legal chops and get you in trouble, or we couldn't because you're by the book. My point is, you've used that knowledge, I think, to find different ways to either just to come up with creative real estate structures and deal structures that being in having your own law firm has given you, I think, a competitive advantage in that regard. So tell us more
Sure.
about your approach to that and just help us understand more of what you're doing there.
Yeah, and actually, honestly, you're definitely right about that. But I think maybe actually the biggest advantage it gave me was relationships, to be honest, because I was able to add value to people in really significant ways that almost no one else could, right? So I found a lot of partners in previous clients or people who I've just helped for free navigate a tricky situation. But then you're definitely right that it's given me advantage on what I mean, it's given me a huge advantage on structuring deals and papering them up, obviously, right? And for papering partnerships and things of that nature. But it's also given me a big advantage of really thinking more clearly about risk because I think risk is this foreign thing to most
Mm,
people that's sort of like out there. They don't really have to think about it because when you start a partnership or when you buy a deal, no one starts a partnership thinking, okay, well, we're going to split up in 4 years,
yep.
right? Everybody thinks, okay, we're going to make a bunch of money and you're going to do this part and I'm going to do this part and it's going to be great. And so getting to see all these lawsuits and partnerships that have gone bad and people going to court and they don't have a contract or they have a contract that's really poorly drafted and how that all plays out. I think it really helped me to be able to um, assess the risk of situations and partnerships and deals and protect myself from those and maybe even most importantly just say no to a lot of things.
Yeah. Well, so a couple of different directions. First, on the risk thing, I've said this before, but like, I encourage people to take action and, have the courage to go do new things, but I also encourage them to size up the worst case scenario and understand the risk.
Yep.
And then also know that a lot of times the best case scenario, you might not be able to understand what that is because, buying one house, the best case scenario isn't that house. It's learning how to invest in a house, and you might grow that to a portfolio of 50. But when I say
Right.
that, I say it knowing that maybe people don't have as good of an or they don't have as good an understanding of the risk that they might get into in a partnership or in a deal that you might. So I mean, partnerships going bad, like what are some big things that just big mistakes that people make? Um, Partnership, real estate, whatever it might be.
Yeah, well, yeah, I mean, when it comes to partnerships, the number one mistake that people make is partnering with people who don't have integrity, character, share values. That's probably the number one. Because
Love
the reason that's such a big problem is because it doesn't matter what else goes right, it's still going to be a problem, right? And you can get away with that for a little bit, some deals go well, but eventually that's going to come back to bite you. So that's probably the number one thing. And that's why I don't have very many people I've partnered with. And the occasion that I'll step out on a limb and enter into a partnership with someone that I don't know super, super well, it's because I'm willing to accept, like you were talking about, accept that worst case scenario. You know what? If that deal goes completely bad, I can live with it,
Yep.
basically. So that's the biggest thing. And then the second thing is just really thinking through alignment, I would say, and incentives and and then exit strategies. So I'd say alignment and incentives and exit strategies. To not get into like, what provision is done the worst or whatever. These are really the big picture things I see a lot.
Yep.
So people who, they're splitting it 50-50, but it turns out one person's really doing 75% of the work,
Yeah.
right? Or it turns out one person really wants cash flow and the other person really wants to,
Yeah.
make a quick buck. And this wasn't really thought about, right? Um,
And those
and
can be two good people that want different things,
for
right? It's
sure,
not like
for
it's two
sure.
bad people. Like partnerships go bad not because it's two bad people or even one bad person. Partnerships can go bad
Absolutely.
because there's just a lack of alignment on what they want, their goals, their core values, things like that.
Absolutely.
Um,
So
so the other thing you said that I want to tie, you talked about the relationships you have and how that has been a key advantage. And I think, not everyone's has a law firm or has connections like you do in that regard, but people do have connections, or they have sources of income, jobs, whatever it might be, where there's access to people possibly, or the potential to create connections. I think what you've been able to do is build trust from them because they had a chance to work with you. They see you're responsive. They see you know what you're talking about, right? They learn your core values, but also through that year, 2, 3 working with them, you can assess them or look back. If they ask about a partnership, you can say, okay, my track record with this group is good or not good. But my point is, whatever people are doing outside of real estate, there's a lot of different opportunities to connect with people and build relationships that can lead to a money partner or someone that can find deals for you or whatever it might be. So I guess what guidance would you be on, like, was your approach that really just you were supporting them from a legal perspective and it came up, or was there more strategy than that?
Yeah, I mean, so I think the reason I've been able to build so many valuable relationships is mostly two things. Number one, I'm very interested and passionate about real estate, so I'm not faking it, right? Like when I go, and that led me to dedicate a bunch of time, right? I was working, I'd wake up at 5 a.m., I'd drive to the firm I was working at, getting started, and I'd drive back home, and then at 6 p.m., I'd go to the rent event, and I'd go around and I'd talk to people. People wanted to understand whatever I could help them with, I would talk to them for free, try to help everybody, right? So that's one thing, is that passion. And then that segued to the second reason, which is just genuinely try to help as many people as I can and add value where I can. And I've not always been perfect about that, right? Like I can be pretty selfish sometimes, but in general, what I've tried to do is I've tried to help add value to as many people as I can. And that can help you build relationships really quickly.
Yeah, I love it. And like, I mean, the book The Go Giver comes to mind. Like, just serve others,
Mhm.
and don't just do it because it's the right thing to do, but long term, that's going to ultimately add value back to you. And
And
you're being humble when you said you can be selfish sometimes because you're a great guy. So I don't know if I
oh,
believe that or not.
Oh, I can well talk to my wife. She'll verify this for sure. But
um,
but even now, like so, obviously you have to protect your time, right? So that at some point you've got to draw lines and say no to things and say no to people, right? But even now, when people call my firm and it's something where we have to accept an upfront retainer. Well, the first thing I'm going to do when they call our law firm, for example, is I'm going to figure out, can we help them, right? If they pay us money, do I feel strongly that we're going to be able to help them and give them a return on that? And if we can't, we say, look, we think you should go down the street, or we think you should, we advise them to do something that's not paying us a dollar, right?
yeah.
So that's always been our approach. And my approach is like, I'm going to try to help you. And if that leads to you helping me or helping my business, that's great. But that's not the first priority.
And I'm guessing it creates the willingness for people to reach out, which again, you got to be protective of your time, but also that's building your potential client base. It's building it up big time because people aren't saying, man, if I just ask Matt a question, they're going to charge me. It's no, if I ask Matt a question, he's going to tell me, is he the best person to help you out or not? So it's just a great way for people to trust you
Exactly.
and come to you. You talked about protecting your time. Um, you know, and you just I think rattled off 4 different businesses, probably more entities than that because I'm sure within real estate there's different entities and
Yeah.
stuff, but property management, title company, law firm, a lot of different real estate,
We had a real
family.
estate brokerage too, I forgot to mention. So yeah, we were up to like 12 or 13 entities. One of the things I've been doing in the last few years is trying to get more focused. So we've whittled a few of those down by mergers or shutting things down. But yeah, too
What
many things at once.
Well, so where I was going to go, but I want to come to the focus. I want to talk about focus. And then I want to talk about how you balance really being a true entrepreneur because of all these things you're doing with family life too. But for a second, what led to wanting to have more focus, and how did you decide what to focus on?
Yeah, so two things led to focus, I would say. Number one is I realized that things were suffering that I was not willing to let suffer to the degree they were suffering anymore, which mostly included my spirituality and my family, right? So I got to a point where our marriage was not doing that great. And I was blaming everybody but myself. And then I looked around and finally I got some clarity at one point and realized I'm saying yes to so many things and I'm saying no to my marriage. And so that's really the other thing that it basically led to is I realized that by saying yes to so many things, I was saying no to other things. And I also realized that if I were to focus on less, then those things would be much more effective and you know could grow and could add more value that way than by trying to do everything at once.
And so when you did that, so now you've decided, okay, I need to bring more focus, or I need to be more focused. How did you figure out what like what businesses to focus more on to put your kind of
Yeah.
time and energy and money into?
Well, mostly what it came down to me is what was the most like what was I the most passionate about and what was the most important to me. So there was a moment where I sat down. I've been writing goals for forever, right? And the way my goals would always look year after year after year, there'd be like, all right, like a money goal, right? Like I want to make this much money or hit this much net worth or something like that. And then there'd be like business goals. And then and then at the bottom of my list, almost inevitably every time there'd be like health and family or spiritual goals. They were like number 5 or 6 or 7, you know what I'm saying? And
Yep.
every year I'd get to the end of the year and I might have hit my revenue goal, and I look back and those 4 5 6 on the list never got any attention. And after 5 6 7 years of doing this, lo and behold, my businesses are doing pretty good. My marriage, not so much.
Right.
So I started writing my goals and literally flipped them. Right. So then my marriage and my spirituality were at the top, and that's how I wrote them. That's how I prioritized them. And I say that to say that's all I did with my businesses too. Right. As I looked at them, I'm like, all right, I'm doing the brokerage, I'm doing the title company, I'm doing this, I'm doing that. What do I actually, um, if I were to pick one or two, what would I pick? And how do I get rid of the rest? And the hardest part about that was it required sacrifice, right? Like I had to take a hit on revenue a little bit to focus on my marriage for a year, right? I had to figure out an exit on a couple businesses that was not very lucrative in order to get that time back and focus on the ones that I wanted to focus on.
Yeah. First of all, I love the, yes to something means no to something else. And I think like I for sure need to tell myself this because if I'm saying yes to something, I'm saying no to getting home when I want to get home, or I'm saying no to being present at home when I should be present at home because I'm thinking about this new deal or this new opportunity or whatever it might be. So I don't like to say no to people in business, which means I want to say yes, which means I'm saying no to something else. So I like that a lot. And then the other thing I would, I've been thinking about this, your goals and flipping them. As you said, I love this concept. I'm actually thinking about this right now. If you would ask somebody what are your life priorities? A lot of people would say faith, family, finance, fitness, and probably in that order
Right,
is what they would say. But
right,
since you're listening to this podcast and since you're on this podcast and you talk about it, that means we like to educate ourselves, right? So we're educating ourselves on things. We're also, um, you know, like I encourage people to network and associate with others around their goals and what they want. My challenge to people is the education, so the books you're reading, the podcast you're listening to, are those like what percentage of those are on business versus faith, family, finance, fitness, like in that order? Like, are you listening? Am I listening to a family podcast or a business podcast? Am I listening to a faith podcast or a business podcast? Please keep listening to ours. But my point is, we say our priorities, but we don't live our priorities. So just taking like there's almost a scorecard we should be thinking about to really measure ourselves. And I don't know if you had a formal process for that, but you certainly recognized, I think you thought those were your priorities, but you felt like you weren't living them and you came to that realization at that time.
yeah, that's exactly right. I started to just realize, what do I actually want? And there was um, a moment in my journal where I was like, I've always wanted to hit these net worth goals and, do certain things in real estate and all these different things. And I journaled one day and basically I said, if I could double my net worth in the next year, but my health and my marriage were at risk, would it be worth it? And the answer was no. Actually, I might have wrote some cuss words in there. I don't know if you like, but it was an expletive no. Like it was
Yeah.
just like a realization. It's like I keep telling myself that this is important to me, but everything I do and how I actually prioritize my money and my time and my energy that's not how I'm setting my life up, right? I've gotten into these habits because I wanted to build freedom and net worth. I think largely from a place of fear at the beginning, right? And so I got into this pattern that I had to break out of that wasn't serving me anymore.
Yeah.
I needed it for a little while. I needed that to do that extra, um, do those extra hours and put that extra energy in to build these things I wanted to create the life I wanted. But
And
then when I got to the end of that, I didn't have the life I wanted because I didn't know how to turn it off.
right.
You
Now, the
know?
good thing is when you got to the end of that, you didn't have your life you wanted, but I do think like there's this financial freedom, financial maturity that people go through. And I think the question is, would have you been able to make the switch if you were way earlier on in your career and not as quote financially far along or mature? Or were you really, did you have to be where you were in your quote financial maturity to make that decision? For me, I'd like to think
Yeah.
I could have done it earlier, but I don't know. Like, I don't know. I think there's just this process, and really it's around mindset and your expectations. But it's easy, I think, to say, like, yes, we would have made that switch earlier. But I think everyone has this different maturation process on money, on time, on freedom, on whatever it is that they just have to work through on their own.
Yeah, I was listening to the podcast the other day, and the guy was on there, and he's like, I'm a multimillionaire, and I'm not happy. And the host said, "Well, congratulations." He's like, "You figured out that money doesn't buy you happiness.
Yeah, right.
Now it's time
Exactly.
to." And for me personally, I don't think I think I had to go through that to get to this financial freedom thing I was obsessed with. For me personally, I
Yep.
had to get there
Yep.
before I could work heavily on the other things.
Yeah.
Now, there are other people that I think can figure that out earlier than I was able to, but that's just how I was wired, I think.
Yeah, no, that's you summarize that really, really well. Now, so if I go back, you kind of you flipped your goals as you said. So what does that look like? Like, what does that mean on how do you balance today entrepreneurship versus like your faith, family, finance, all that. Or, sorry, faith, family, health. Like, how do you balance this stuff? Because you still do have a lot going on. You have a lot of businesses
Sure,
going on, a lot of real
sure.
estate. So how do you balance that today?
Well, I mean, the reality of it is it's a constant struggle. And I think as soon as we pretend, I got to a point where I thought that if I got this next thing or if I got this financial freedom, then life would not be a struggle anymore. And there's some truth to that, but the reality of it is if you're growing and you're trying to achieve things and you're trying to create a better life for you and your family or other people, there's going to be struggle involved, right? And so for me, it's a struggle pretty much every day to try to keep my priorities in check because I've got these different tendencies, right? We were talking about. Somebody calls me and they ask me for help. It's hard for me to say no to that, right? Somebody tries to schedule me. It's hard to say no. If I've got a business opportunity or a deal opportunity, it's really hard for me to say no. For some reason, naturally, it's easy for me to say no to some things that are actually my most important priorities on a
Yep.
daily basis, right? So I have to be intentional about it. I've got to schedule date nights with my wife or lunches or breakfast with my wife. I've got to certain days I need to spend the morning with my kids, even though I've got that urge and I feel like I have to get to work. I'm going to spend the morning with my kids and I'm going to take my son to the bus stop, right? And it's just having certain things that reflect on a daily basis that reflect what I want my priorities to be, not reflect what my natural reactions to the my environment are, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it is. And one thing that comes to mind, I was just in a discussion the other day, like we're always going to have 100 things to do, or we can come up with them. We could work 100 hours a week and we'd still have things that we'd want to get done. And I think there's just like figuring out how to stop, be efficient with your time while you are working, but realize like you're not going to get the next 3 months worth of work done this week. And even if you do, you're going to have 3 months worth of work next week because you're to the next phase or whatever. So I don't know. There's a lot of times that even for me, this limiting belief, I think, or scarcity mindset around time and not having enough time and trying to work a lot and get so much done that I think maybe entrepreneurial people or just people in general, um, think we can solve, but we don't really do it. So I think it's natural for people, as you said, and like you said for yourself, to say yes to business things and no to other things. So you got to be really disciplined, really intentional. Like, what does that look like for you now? Or I heard someone else say, like, if you have 5 years, what a perfect day would look like, be intentional. Like, do that this week, do that next week. So, not that I got it all figured out. I by far don't, and it's a continuous struggle, but we could work ourselves to death literally if we don't be really disciplined about it. So,
Yeah. And I mean, like, there are some things that I've had to prioritize that have been game changers. That if I would, like marriage counseling and therapy is something that I prioritized that was hugely important, right? Just spending quality time with the people I care about has been hugely important. Spending time to think and reflect, and I still struggle with the exercise thing, but that's about all I'm facing right now, right? I'm realizing that it's natural for me to want to push that to the side and go into the office and work, or to be on the phone and try to make a deal happen when I should be exercising, right? Um, and eating healthy and things like that. And you just have to build upon that, and every day, every week, try to prioritize your calendar and your schedule and your life to meet what you really want your priorities to be.
yeah, and I think the big thing is like you're in a routine now, but coming up with the systems and like Atomic Habits talks about it, but coming up with a system and the routine that works for you where it forces you to prioritize. Because, man, I'm like this morning, for example, I went to bed early, got a great start, got up earlier than normal, got a great start. But as I'm going through my morning routine, I'm thinking, man, I could really get to work early and like really get some things done.
Yeah,
Like there's always this nudge, like, man, I could get a lot done this morning, and you just got to be disciplined and routine about what you like the biggest priorities and be clear on that. So love it, man. Well, I think again, just from getting to know you a little bit, there's like you're living it. I appreciate your transparency on just the struggle. By the way, I think through struggle, we didn't talk about this, but through struggle, a lot of times is lessons. Like
oh yeah,
you're probably going to be in a period where you either like things are going great, and if that you're there, expect things to maybe turn down a little bit. And if things are tough right now, like you're probably in a cycle and things will come up a little bit. So I think you just learn so much through struggle.
absolutely. And I think it's important to be relatively transparent about that, right? Because you don't have to share everything with the world, but I also think you need to be authentic with the world, right? And you see all this stuff where someone's making all this money and they're doing all these big things, but they don't talk about how their marriage is suffering, right? um and I don't think that's good for people to see, because that's not what real life is actually like when you're doing these things.
Yeah. So first, I just wrote two things I love is like there's the mindset around struggle. I think just to cap that is that expect struggle and know that you're growing through struggle. But then like if you're authentic and transparent about things you're struggling with, first of all, the hardest thing to do is say it the first time. But once you say it and it's out there, the world knows like all the pressure's off you. Now the world knows like I don't have to hide this. Like, yes, I'm struggling in this area and the whole world knows it. Therefore, I don't have to worry about what people think anymore because people know about it. So I don't think we've talked about that at all, but being authentic, transparent, open about your struggles. By the way, not only is it going to help you, it's going to help somebody that is also struggling with the same thing. Like
Hmm.
you're going to talk about it, and someone's like, "I'm so thanks so much for talking about that because I've been hiding this. I've been working on this, but hiding this for years, and I finally have someone to talk to about." So I love that. Just love that concept. All right, I want to switch gears a little bit to, you started a lot of businesses. You made a lot of like just moves and shifts. Like, how has your how has your mindset from when you started to now, like how has your mindset shifted over time, whether that's in general or some specific things that shifted your mindset?
Yeah, I mean, the one of the things that I'm still working through in certain areas is thinking I had to do everything myself was a huge one. Um, and I've always been big into leverage, but really understanding how to leverage people has been huge. I figured out pretty early, and actually what got me into real estate, honestly, was the leverage concept, because I was trying to figure out how to get financial freedom, make some money in a short amount of time. And I realized, wow, with real estate, I can really get some tremendous leverage. And then I figured out was, seller financing and creative deal structuring and partnerships, crazy leverage. But
Yep.
what I didn't understand on the business side very well was the people leverage.
Yep.
And now a lot of my time, I'm learning how my time is most valuably spent in my businesses inspiring other people how to grow and learn and become leaders themselves, right? Like teaching other people how to lead and how to grow is some of the most valuable time I spent.
Yeah. I I love
So
that. And I mean, I work, I'm not claiming anything on leadership, but I worked on it, studied like leadership and inspiring people, training people. Yeah, it creates opportunities to leverage them. And don't think of that like as a negative, right? There's people that
no,
want to do those roles, that want to do those jobs, that want to, be on your team. That's not everyone wants to be an entrepreneur, and there's a lot of risk with entrepreneurship, but that's just not the personality. So don't think of that as a negative either, but developing your interpersonal and leadership skills, I think, to grow your business and leverage, to scale your business, if that's what you want to do, I think is so important. What were some of the biggest, or big fears along the way?
you know, and this kind of leads to one of the other answers to the last question. I think I had this big fear that it was never going to be enough, like, which maybe I don't know how to describe this, but it's kind of like an obsession with some sort of outcome all the time, right? Like, and I think, maybe it was a fear of not being enough, right? Or not being able to be successful, or this fear of like falling off and having this moment of humiliation, right? Like, look, you know, he was out there trying to do it and he was unsuccessful, and let's, everybody look at this. But I've kind of started to develop this mindset of like journey, not the destination sort of
Yep.
mindset,
Yep.
where I set these goals now. For the first time, I used to be obsessed with my goals, which was good and bad, but I think mostly bad. Now I set a goal, whether it be a revenue goal or whatever it is, and it's exciting. I believe I can accomplish it and I strive towards it, but I'm not holding on tightly to it, right? Like my happiness or my fulfillment is not connected to whether I hit that goal or not anymore, right? So now I'll set the revenue goal and it's an exciting thing and we can dream and we can build some amazing things around that goal, but I'm not going home disappointed. You know, occasionally I do, but in picture, I'm still happy whether I'm had a good revenue month or a bad revenue month, or whether I exceed the goal or whether I miss it.
Yep.
Um, so it's just I guess it's a contentment thing. It's not a fear of not being able to have a life worth living if I don't achieve or hit certain things, I guess.
Yeah, no, I like that. And I think contentment is such a difficult word, because contentment doesn't mean I'm not trying to do new things or not trying to grow. But I think what you're saying is you're content with whatever the outcome is as you're trying to do
Right.
those things. Like, no matter, I'm trying to learn, I'm trying to grow, I'm trying to get better, but I'm content with whatever the outcome is, because my identity isn't tied to the outcome. My identity is tied to what, like, the process I'm taking, to what I'm doing, not the results I get. So, um, yeah, the content's just, it's a hard, it can be, I think it can be misinterpreted. Content, a lot of people think content means I'm just not going to do anything. I'm just content and I'm not going to change anything. No, to me, it's, don't get obsessed in the outcome. Be content with whatever the outcome, if you put in the work at whatever your priorities are.
Yeah, exactly. And for me, I actually had to struggle through, I got to what I considered was financial freedom. And then I tried the whole, well, I'm not going to do very much thing. And that did not work very well for me. I wasn't very happy or content. So like that's the
Correct.
ironic thing. And so then I overcorrected. I guess and so now I'm trying to find this happy balance where I've got things that I'm doing, but I'm passionate about. I'm trying to do more of what I love and what I want to do, less of what I don't want to do, but be content in the meantime,
Yeah,
just with wherever things take me.
I think a warning to everyone that's pursuing like financial independence, and especially to those of you that get there, that probably means you're pretty motivated and you take a lot of action, which means you're going to enjoy the beach for about a week and then you're going to be like, okay, what am I going to do
Yeah.
next? So warnings, warning shot fired. If you just really step back and reflect at all this, Matt, if you look at, you
Yeah.
know, your, not, I don't want to make this a professional question, but I want to make it a, how your professional decisions have impacted your whole life, as you talked about. But, take this where you want. If you step back and reflect, like, how does what you've done, what you're doing, how does it make you feel?
Hmm. How does it make me feel? It makes me feel like we're all here to just try to become the best version of ourselves and make other people do the same thing. And so that leads me to believe that at the end of the day, it's all about other people, right? And so it's a constant journey of self-actualization, understanding yourself better, how you relate to the people who are closest to you and how you're impacting those people around you. And so I've done a really bad job of that sometimes. I've done a really amazing job of that sometimes. But I think, how does it make me feel? It makes me feel like every day I'm trying to get better and I'm bringing people up with me. So I feel pretty good about it.
I love it, man. That is an awesome answer. What would you say has been like a key factor to your success and fulfillment?
My wife has been huge. She's been incredibly supportive. We share values together. We share our goals together, our struggles, and she's very instrumental in everything I do. Um, and I'd say the other thing is what I mentioned earlier is somehow I caught on to this idea of adding value to other people. I think I don't know the quote, but Zig Ziglar has the quote about, if you help other people get what you get, you probably know the quote. You're
Yeah,
shaking your
I'm familiar with it and I'm trying
but
to like remember the exact words, but it's good.
but the point is, I really have realized that mostly on accident, that it's like the more people I help achieve their goals and their outcomes and just move them forward in a positive direction and help them how I can, the more I grow and the farther I go.
Yeah,
So,
man, I love that. Love that. What has been the most impactful book that you have read?
um, that is a good question. I read a lot of that's a hard question for me because I read a lot of books. Most recently, the Ruthless Elimination of Hurry that's on your wall right there has been
Yeah,
huge for me, and it kind of maybe some of the things I've described about my
yeah,
struggle explains that.
correct.
Um, because I realized that I realized I don't want to become a billionaire who's miserable. I'd
Right.
rather I'd rather be broke and enjoy the journey than be rich and not enjoy the journey.
Yep.
And so that's been huge for me. How to Win Friends and Influence People, Think and Grow Rich. Those were really Rich Dad Poor Dad. Those were huge for me when I was a teenager
Yep.
and got me onto this financial path.
Yeah.
And then recently, business book that's probably had the most impact is 10x is easier than 2x.
Oh
Has
man.
been a big one for me. It really flipped my thinking on a lot of things.
And I just was reviewing my notes from that. So people hear that title and it's like, oh, 10x, like, but it's not the summary of that. Because some other, first of all, you reference a lot of phenomenal books and some classics in there. Like every one of those books is great. 10x is easier than 2x. It's the key word is easier because it forces you to completely become a new person, get better, become a better version of yourself, as you talked about, shift your mindset, focus. Like it's not, hey, go big. It's actually the opposite of that. It's be a little bit different in your approach. So I don't know if the title like it could scare people off or not, but
Yeah.
it's absolutely fantastic.
Well, and how it relates to my life is it's like, a lot of life is a grind, right? Like you're trying to get a little bit better at something or just like get things up a little bit of percentage. And I think there are moments in your life where you reinvent yourself. And
Yeah.
that's really where you can see tremendous gains. And I think that's part of the point of 10x is easier than 2x is like changing the way you're thinking about your problems and your business and your life. Like
Right.
what if this was 10x, what would it look like? And it just changes your thought process a lot for
Exactly.
me.
So much of it starts with mindset. So I love that. Look, Matt, this has been awesome. I really, really appreciate coming on. So much value. I mean, just real estate, deal structure, your thought process of serving and helping others and how those relationships and building trust has led to business for you, kind of the lifestyle, thought process and design and, flipping your goals. That was a great segment on that I loved. So I just really, really appreciate it. How can people find out more about you, Matt?
Yeah, just find me on Facebook or Instagram or whatever, or go to our website of andersonlegaltn.com. Just Matt Anderson. Look for me, you'll find me.
Awesome, Matt. Thanks so much, man. I appreciate it.
All right, thanks, man.
For the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast, signing off. Thank you for listening to the Muller Real Estate and Business Podcast. We hope you found today's episode helpful. If you know current or aspiring investors or entrepreneurs or anyone that would benefit from today's episode, we appreciate you sharing it with them, or better yet, providing us a 5-star review. To learn more about Muller Real Estate, visit our website at www.mullerre.com. You can also sign up for our newsletter or local events via our website. In closing, I encourage you to be purposeful in all areas of life, educate yourself, network with others that have been successful, take action, and lead. Thank you.